Classwork 4, Eyes on the Prize, Part 3, and Part 4. Alright, let's start. So, in Part 3, we learned about protest. What type of protest did they do? That we learned about in this part was where sit-ins were common during this time for a form of silent and peaceful protest. We learned about a sit-in where 4 men did a sit-in at a whites-only diner on February 1st, 1960, and refused to leave. This occurred in Nashville, Tennessee. So now that we're talking about Nashville, what was Nashville during this time? At this time, Nashville was promoted to be the Athens of the South. They were thought to be very progressive, but they still had segregation. So how progressive were they? They had lots of shoppings, and blacks would go and spend money down there at the shops, but would be refused seats at the restaurants that were located within these restaurants. And they didn't find this fair, so they thought, how can we change this? So the way that they thought of how can we make a difference, how can we be heard, and how can we make them look at us and respect us the same and allow us to sit at these lunch counters. So they had a couple ideas. The first idea was sit-ins. So the first sit-in was organized by a guy named Jim Lawson, who promoted peaceful and nonviolent protest. This sit-in was carried out by John Lewis, Angela Butler, Dion Nees, and they led fellow students to the first sit-in. The first sit-in, the waitresses were nervous. No one knew what was going on. They didn't know what to do. This has never happened before. The students stayed true to their nonviolence and did nothing and just sat there in silence. When police arrived, they asked them to move or get arrested. And staying true to their motive, they chose to get arrested instead. This had a big impact on the civil rights movement because this spread nationwide. There was sit-ins across the country happening every day. This was a good form of protest because it really brought attention because this went nationwide. It was peaceful and something that anybody could do. And this had a big impact on the civil rights because it was desegregating restaurants and public places. This was a step forward to desegregation. Also, Nashville's boycott. Nashville's boycott that they're famous for during this time period was on retail stores, actually. Downtown. Everyone quit going shopping downtown. They said, don't go spend your money at the retail stores. If they're not going to serve us at their lunch counters and treat us with equality, let's not give them our money. And that's exactly what they did. So soon it went nationwide, with sit-ins occurring in 69 other cities and the boycott of retail stores spreading to other major metropolitan areas that had retail stores like this, like New York, Detroit, stuff like Philly, Philadelphia, just large cities in the South too, all across the country. This spread, it has happened everywhere. Blacks quit spending money at the retail stores, and they noticed. In Nashville, they also arranged a peaceful march across the city, where 4,000 people gathered and marched in silence across the city to City Hall, where Ben West gave a speech. And in this speech, he addressed the inequality that they were facing at lunch counters and stuff like that and across the country. And then 3 weeks after Ben West gave his speech at City Hall, African-American customers were served at lunch counters for the first time in downtown stores in Nashville. And this was a huge step in what they were pushing for, because this was desegregation in the South in restaurants. This was huge for the time. This was unheard of. black man sitting at a lunch counter with a white man. This was something brand new and very good for the country that we needed. And then we also, in part 4, learned about the Birmingham bus boycott. And the bus boycott was just like Montgomery, Alabama. It was about a year long. There was violence in it. There was bus bombings when buses would go through. They'd be riding through the country with blacks and whites on the bus, sitting in all sorts of orders. And when they'd go through some of the Deep South, these were called freedom rides. So they go through the Deep South, their buses would be attacked, and the freedom rides ended up getting escorted across the country since bus station to bus station, since it was safer. They'd get off, and the whites would go sit in the colored area, and the blacks would go sit in the whites areas. And this had a big effect on civil rights because it really brought attention that it really didn't matter to people. It really was, this isn't a big deal. We're all the same people on the inside, so what does it matter? We're all the same stuff. We're all made of the same stuff, so let's all be friends. And I mean, this was big for them too because this was a very dangerous thing. I mean, it had a big impact. I mean, these people were willing to risk their lives to fight for equality, and it had a big impact on civil rights because it really showed that they really wanted their freedom and equality.